Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, everyone.
Good
Happy
evening.
Sabbath. It's right around the corner. If it hasn't started already, I haven't even checked when the sundown is around here, but I know it's close. So, welcome, everyone. Welcome, Dr. Ricks and Dave. I'm glad to have you both with us. Let's see here. Tonight, we're doing episode 205, believe it or not. 205, and we're going to talk about a really bad example that Ahab and Jezebel set for the people of Israel. So, if you would start us out, I know you got something for us.
Yes, I think today's going to be an interesting topic in a different kind of way. But instead of having our second, the educational type jokes. So they're on an airplane. And this lawyer sits next to a beautiful woman. He assumes because she's beautiful, she's a little ditzy. So the lawyer on the flight says, let's play a fun game. But she rolls over, just looks out the windows. She wants a nap. The lawyer insists. He says, look, this game is easy and very fun. I'm going to ask you a question. And if you do not know the answer, you pay me $5. And if I don't know the answer, I pay you $5. The beautiful woman still rolls over and doesn't want to play. The lawyer says, he bugs her some more. He says, well, I'll tell you what. What if you don't know the answer, you pay me $5. And if I don't know the answer, if I don't know it, I pay you $500. Well, she's going to bug him anyway. That sounds interesting. So she says it. So the lawyer asks the first question, how far is the earth from the moon? The beautiful woman opens her purse, gives him $5. It's your turn. She says, what goes up a mountain with 3 legs and comes down the mountain with 4 legs? The lawyer gets on his laptop. He even checks with people. He checks on the internet. He can't find a thing. So after a whole hour, he reluctantly gives her $500. Then he says, okay, what's the answer? What's the answer? She rolls over again, opens her purse, and gives him $5. Who says that beautiful women are dumb? Okay, here's another one of these long, well, somewhat thought-provoking jokes. This is called Testing in Texas. Testing in Texas. Charlie Edwards is a highly esteemed 3rd grade teacher at Jacksboro Elementary in Jacksboro, Texas. In an effort to prepare the students for all the important tasks and tests, she compiles an exam consisting of 20 questions, which she administers to her students. The exam purportedly covered a broad array of topics. Her first topic was, students, I want you to tell me the 4 seasons. Tell me the 4 seasons. And the students rattle them off. There's dove season, deer season, and turkey season.
I thought you were going to name the 4 seasons.
God bless America. I love that 4 season dove, turkey. Anyway, deer. Anyway, this third one is another thought-provoking one. It's called packaging. Maybe we can all identify with this a little bit, possibly. Recently, I bought a cartridge for my printer. It came in this big box. It was all full of wrappers and cushioning pad and a box. You find a little tiny cartridge in there, but here's all this box and big wrapper. But the actual product was quite small. But they made the packaging unnecessarily large. And we said, you know, honey, I think they do that to make it harder to steal and to make the customers feel better about buying something high priced that's really so small. I pointed this out to my wife and mentioned how my weight gain over the last 10 years of our marriage should have the same effect. Hold on just a minute. how we got rid of that one.
Call from communications.
Hit that other button. Oh, we didn't think to cut this.
Call line 5, Dr. Rick. Paging Dr. Rick's line 5.
Okay. We usually cut this thing off. Let me be sure I cut off. I know you're all dying to know the punchline, right? Okay. So he says his weight gain is really a good thing. He tells his wife, look, it makes me seem more valuable because there's more of me, and I'm much harder. It's harder for other women to steal me. Somebody's looking at me agape like they didn't. That wasn't funny. Well, if you're bigger, you're less likely to be stolen by another woman. I don't know. Never mind. Some people see the humor in that. I see it.
Sandy and I used to joke about this lady we knew she was heavy, and she kept getting bigger and heavier and getting more and more tattoos. And one day we put it together. She's gaining weight to have room for more tattoos.
Hey,
makes sense.
More surface area that way.
That's right.
She kept having to get the others colored over because they were getting thinner, you know.
You're terrible. Terrible.
We used to joke she's going to get an eagle tattooed on her back, and when she got old, she'd have to have a nest made on her butt.
I didn't laugh at that. I'm thinking, keep my face straight, stay out of trouble.
My wife made
What am I going to do with you? All right, moving right along. We have another joke, Dr. Riggs.
No, I think I've
oh, no, we need one right now.
Big enough mess now. Yeah, I think that's a big enough mess. Yes. Okay. It's sort of like when two elements are having a heated discussion. What is it? A heavy discussion. Okay, never mind. Okay, now we're looking at the religious crisis created by Jezebel and Ahab for Israel. As we all know, that the northern 10 tribes had already had a pagan compromise when Jeroboam changed the calendar. And that created problems. But then when Jezebel and Ahab took over, things went from bad to worse. Ken's going to read the first slide for us. Or did we lose that one, the first slide?
Nope. 1 Kings 16:25. Omri did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and did worse than all who were before him. For he walked in all the ways of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, and in his sin by which he had made Israel sin, provoking the Lord God of Israel to anger with their idols.
One thing to consider, Omri was a real strong man. His daughter-in-law was Jezebel, which he might have had some arrangements and all that. I'm sure that was at least a factor in things getting bad. But then when he passed away and Ahab ascended to the throne, and now Jezebel is the queen behind the throne, things went from bad, real bad, to very, very, very bad. And Israel entered what we can call a religious crisis, because God is really upset with them, and I think as well as a bad influence on a society. Let's go ahead and read the next slide, please.
All right, 1 Kings 16:31. And as if copying the evil ways of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, was a small thing for him, he took as his wife Jezebel, daughter of daughter of Ethbaal, king of Zidon, and became a servant and worshiper of Baal. And he put up an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he had made in Samaria. And Ahab made an image of Asherah and did more than all the kings of Israel before him to make the Lord, the God of Israel, angry.
And we're going to talk about that Asherah. And often there was, it was a statue of a female goddess, and often accompanied by what they call an Asherah pole. The pole was well, not to offend anybody, but the pole was a phallic symbol of some sort. They found this stuff all over the Middle East. And I think it's one thing to say that all the kings in the past were bad. And Omri was pretty bad. But then Ahab was the worst. And I believe that he was weak in some ways at least. And Jezebel got in there, and she was a priestess. It wasn't just the normal Baal worship in Palestine. It was one of the worst ones as far as the Asherah pole and decadence is concerned, because they all weren't alike.
I think they took it to a new level, a new low.
Interesting side thought is there were people that had migrated from Babylon into Europe. And it's interesting that they brought with them their customs, the Christmas trees, and which is a tabernacle tree and that kind of thing. But there's a country that's called Austria, and those people had migrated historically from northern Babylon. So I find it interesting that the name of the country, I don't know if that's just a strange coincidence or if it's a play on the same word.
Austria, Asherah. Interesting. Let's go to the next slide as we move into this Baal worship. According to the commentaries, it put Israel in a religious crisis for about 50 years, or in almost 17 chapters of the Book of Kings is involved with this religious crisis in the northern 10 tribes.
All right. 1 Kings 19:14, and he said, I have been very jealous for the Lord God of hosts, because the children of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, thrown down thy altars, and slain thy prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away.
Now, we're not doing all this in chronological order necessarily, but over a period of time, not only was Jezebel pushing Asherah and Baal in this form of Baal worship, Baal Merkot, the form of it, but they were suppressing the worship of the true God, where they were executing people, persecuting people, frightening people so they wouldn't do the right thing. And when you read some of the coming chapters, some of the true worshipers were hidden out in caves for their own safety. But the prophet actually thought at this point he was the only one left. Apparently there were others hidden out throughout the country he didn't know about. But the fact that he could think he was the only one left, that shows you the degree in which they were suppressing the worship of the true God. And the question I'm asking, I really don't think anything like it's going to happen in America, but I can see it happening in Europe. The worship of, let's say, a really biblical Christianity, as we understand it, might get outlawed to the point where those who worship it are so scattered and hidden that in the public eye, you'll hardly notice them. That could happen. Probably will happen in Europe.
Well, they're certainly trying to make
maybe Latin America too.
They're trying to make that happen here. If you really watch and listen to the different newscasts, I mean, I heard a guy tonight that said, "Listen, if you have Russian dressing in your refrigerator and you've had a vodka drink recently, you're going to be under suspect." You know, they're trying to shut down everything Christian and everything good. These marches they're having and all this stuff going on online. To me, I kind of see something's behind that, where they're going to try to shut us down and not allow us to worship the way we believe that we should.
Right? They're trying to destroy the culture of this country and tear it down. They've been doing it with gay marriage and multiple things. Today I heard that the military has sent out a note, a memorandum, or whatever, that the women in the military need to expect that there could be transgender men in their showers.
Right.
And they use this stuff to keep cutting down this country. So pretty soon, I mean, if you say anything, think anything, mention anything that goes contrary to their leftist beliefs, you're going to be shunned. Well, it's already that way now for the most part. You can't say a thing at work. You say anything at work that is the least bit pro-Christian, or if the subject comes up, you don't, or you won't have a job.
Well, have you seen what's going on with the Teen Vogue?
Yeah, I've seen that. I think that's all over the internet. I mean, I've been seeing it all over the internet.
Yeah. Did you hear what Bernie said in one of the Senate hearings? We might have mentioned it before, but he said, if you're a really Bible-believing Christian and you really believe the Bible, that Christianity is the only way to salvation, you're unfit for public office. I thought, wow. And if you had gone back 200 years ago, they would have said the exact opposite. They had different opinions as to what was the true gospel, but you had to believe something. If you didn't believe in Christianity, in many places, you could never have gotten elected. Now, Bernie Sanders and a lot of Democrats on the committee agreed with him. They're flipping it to the exact opposite. And nobody in the media, except one Christian station, was even shocked by it. The media didn't say a thing, like, oh, this is normal. Now, Bernie did a clever to it, but
that's the scary part, is it is normal now. That's the new normal in this country, that all the stuff that 20, 30 years ago would have been abnormal or unheard of is normal now. And anybody who opposes that is the abnormal. And I think it's only gonna keep getting worse. And it's only gonna keep getting to the point where it's gonna be almost impossible for a Christian to function as a Christian in this country and not have serious consequences. But we know this is coming. It's not new.
I hope it doesn't get that bad here. I know it's going to be that bad in Europe and Latin America, 100%. I think there's still a lot of Christians here fighting back, but I know what you mean. I'm worried about it too. I see the trend. I kid with my grandkids. Yeah, you have problems, you grow old, and then you have to go to public school. They hear a lot of bad. Anyway, that's just a joke you have to. Anyway, let's go to the next slide. I'm sure a lot of people love public school.
I will say it's interesting that a lot of people are waking up, though. All right, 1 Kings 17:1. And Elijah and Tishbe of Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, by the living Lord, the God of Israel, whose servant I am, there will be no dew or rain in these years, but only at my word. Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, go from here in the direction of the east and keep yourself in a secret place by the stream of Cherith, east of Jordan.
Now, we don't know exactly all the details, but I think it's possible that Elijah was striking back against this push against God and toward raw, open paganism by saying this is what the nation will get for this kind of sin. And in those days, you didn't go to the Walmart to get your food. If there was a drought, people were going to suffer greatly. And the king couldn't go and pressure Elijah to end the fast because he couldn't find him. Of course, there's a great story about that afterwards, the Mount Carmel story. But even that Mount Carmel story of Jezebel and maybe the Israelites were just too carnal, that still only was a temporary plug. Eventually kept on going in the wrong direction. And so the next number of chapters in the book of Kings are about this religious crisis and resisting it. Elijah the prophet, and Elisha the prophet. The next question that I think we need to ask, because a lot of people will say, well, God gets all upset at paganism and pagan idols, but what's detrimental for mankind in any nation with paganism? Why is paganism bad for people? And I think we were also reading an article from another religious organization, and I'll just summarize it briefly. They were attacking the Seventh-day Adventists, maybe a weak point for them, regarding the Sabbath, because they took Colossians 2:14 and basically said, and they spent the whole article around this one article, that the laws of God were done away. And then they can do away with the Sabbath and the holy days and clean and unclean meats and a few other things. And some churches want to do away with not using images and statues of God for worship. Basically, that's it. Let's look at Colossians 2:14. The only reason I want to do this, we have an article on law and grace and many others, and on Colossians 2:16 for those who want to read it. But I want to just take a digression here to say nothing God ever did as far as laws was bad for mankind. But what paganism does is bad for mankind.
Right. Blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way, nailing it to the cross.
Now, you can go through the entire chapter of Colossians. You'll see he's talking about paganism and other kinds of things and philosophies. But if you did break certain laws in Israel, there could be a handwriting of the indictment against you. And if you were proved innocent, they just blot it out. I think all this is saying is that whatever sins you've been guilty of, the blood of Christ can cover it over, cancel it. That's grace. But grace does not mean the law is over. If you take this the way this particular article was taking it, the way they were taking it, these laws were against us. Now, wait a minute. That means all the laws in the Old Testament were against us? Think about that. What about the law against murder, against stealing, against coveting, against messing with your neighbor's wife? You see where I'm going. That's outrageous and ridiculous, but that was the position. What they don't realize, we all know it, that Jesus Christ was the God of the Old Testament. Why would he give Israel laws that were against them? It's pagan stuff that's against us. And I just want to make that point. Let's go to the next slide as an example of how all of God's laws were made for us. They're not made for God. They're made for us.
Mark 2:27, he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath, so that the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath.
Leave that up for just a minute. Now, we realize he was saying that because of the way the Pharisees were making people miserable on the Sabbath. And he was saying, wait a minute. The Sabbath is not something like some obstacle that people are supposed to suffer through. It was meant for man. God rested on that day so the man would have a day in which to rest, which they know the human body needs, rejuvenate, and get closer to God. By the way, in the French Revolution, they tried a DECA program where you took off every 10 days. It didn't work. There's something about a weekday cycle that apparently is built into our construction. People need a day off once a week if they're going to stay spiritual, to get closer to God and rejuvenate. So that law was made for us, and so were all the other laws. And that's an outrageous interpretation of Colossians 2:14. I know why they do it, so they can get rid of the Sabbath. I understand it. But it's an outrageous assumption. It's paganism that's against us. Wouldn't you all agree that idol before you and the true God, it will block your spiritual rejuvenation?
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
The other thing is that they're trying to hold on to the traditions of men because they don't want to listen to the words of God. I've had people tell me that the traditions of the church are more important than the writings of the apostles. I had an Anglican priest tell me that the tradition.
Yeah, I get into arguments online with people that have mentioned that same sort of thing. That the Catholic Church has whatever they say goes. They have the authority.
I'm going to start just answering with a your mama joke. And you want to talk that stupid.
A lot of this tradition goes back to paganism.
Right. I would say all of it goes back to paganism, because if it is not based exactly on what the words of Christ or the apostles and the prophets, then what is it based on? Then anything else is paganism, in my opinion.
You know, we were talking how if you look at the overview of Israel's history, those 40 cycles, good years, bad years, good years, bad years, it's almost like paganism was a magnet, And if they didn't have good leadership that kept them steering in the right direction, the Israelites would be attracted to paganism. And why was paganism so attractive? Especially the Asherah part of it. As we now know, they had many gods in the pagan world, many gods, but they only had one female consort, known by a few names, including the Queen of Heaven, and that was the Asherah, which is kind of unusual in itself. Of paganism, but many of them got out of what was at least part of the attraction. I think mankind doesn't like to be with the true God. I can't explain. There's something about human nature that doesn't want the real God to tell them what to do. But maybe that's kind of hard to see, but I believe that's in there too. But out of paganism promised them material gain, victory over their enemies, and having irresponsible sex.
You think of another religion that says the same thing nowadays. Seems to be sweeping all over the world, actually.
I tell people that the reason for these things, or for atheism, is to simply do away with morality. See, they'll accept that we were grown out of monkey droppings or aliens made us, because there's no morality associated with that. But when you accept God, you got to put your pants on. You got to stop lying. You got to stop coveting your neighbor's things and possessions and on and on and on. So now you have to go through and change your own brain. Mm-hmm. Well, it's a lot easier just to be a pig. You know?
To be a pig. I like that expression.
It's like, the difference in a man and a pig. But when pigs drink alcohol, they don't turn into a man.
I like that. Let's go to the next slide. I always threw this one in there because it follows right on to them by Ahab being the worst king and all that to Israel. But it also shows how the pagans love to, well, at least they did. They sacrificed their kids.
All right. 1 Kings 16:34. In his days, Hiel made Jericho. He put the base in position at the price of Abrim, his eldest son, and he put its doors in place at the price of his youngest son, Segub, even as the Lord had said by Joshua the son of Nun.
Think about that child sacrifice. That's pretty low. Let's go to the next slide. That's the kind of thing that the paganism had a lot of.
But when you think about it, we're still doing it.
We're not quite as advanced as we thought we were, right?
No, we're not. We've aborted since 1973. The number of people that I read would be the population of Australia.
All right,
go ahead.
Okay, go to 2 Kings 17:16. And turning their backs on all the others, which the Lord had given them, all the orders which the Lord had given them. They made for themselves images of metal and the images of Asherah, worshiping all the stars of heaven and becoming servants to Baal. And they made their sons and their daughters go through the fire, and they made use of secret arts and unnatural powers, and gave themselves up to doing evil in the eyes of the Lord till he was moved to wrath.
Now, think about it. Here's what, at least I read, happened in many cases. They'd have this big fire and this big idol, and he'd have some kind of big hands like this or some kind of altar right under the fire. They'd put a little oil in there or something. They'd beat drums. You couldn't hear the baby screaming. And they would throw babies into the fire. The thought was, if we will to sacrifice a few babies to Baal, whatever the last part of his name is, he'll bless us with prosperity, victory in war, and sex and fertility. I thought, wow, isn't that unbelievable, isn't it?
It's amazing that people can come up with this stuff.
They don't. They don't.
That's true.
You know, those thoughts. I have my son, and I was talking to my wife today. There was just nothing in the world. Him as a baby, growing up as a little boy, even as a teenager, when he really needed to be punched in the nose sometimes, that I wouldn't do for my son. I mean, just there's no way you could have kept me from him. There's no way, you know. For somebody to take their child, the depravity, to have an abortion, the depravity, or to take your child and to just put it in fire, and knowing now what we do with the abortion things, the depravity behind that, I cannot. It's so beyond anything my mind can fathom. You know, as a father, as a parent, you know, when you know your wife is pregnant, you want to try to listen to see if he's in there. You know, I mean, you know, you just can't wait to see this baby born and to hold him and smell him and then teach him to walk in words. And I couldn't imagine taking this child and killing it.
It is unbelievable. Although I was about to say, most babies that are born in America have nothing to do with extreme hardship or some young lady's going to starve to death or something because of the baby. Most of them are done for the convenience of the mother and the dad. Maybe less mouths to support, no child support payment. It's done for convenience and, you know, less money to spend.
Or because
the truth is, they could probably get most of those babies adopted if they really wanted to.
They want to have to get rid of the baby so they can continue living the life of depravity that created the baby to begin with. It's not generally a married couple that's going to abort their child.
Correct.
It's a terrible form of birth control.
You know, it's the parent's job to die for the child. It's just the opposite. You know, you hear the stories of the camping trip.
Some of the dangers of the they call it the sacred feminine or the Asherah worship. And as I said, they had many male gods like Zeus, Baal, Dagon, Molech. And if you read the Greek literature, the Greek pantheon of gods, all of which were bad, and you know, they set a bad example for people. They made their images of God like bad people, like bad little boys, pretty much. But they had one female consort, Asherah, that goes with them. And it was a form of kind of cult prostitution. Let's look at the next slide. Some of the God's warning to the Israelites.
All right, Exodus 34:12. Take heed to thyself, lest thou make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land whither thou goest, lest it be for a snare in the midst of thee. But ye shall break down their altars and dash in pieces their pillars, and ye shall cut down their Asherim.
I think it's the same Asherah poles or Asherah statues, just different spelling. And for some reason, if Israel did not have godly leadership, they seem to be attracted to the this cult a prostitution type cult. Let's go to the next slide and see more of God's warning.
Exodus 34:15. Lest thou make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, that they play the harlot after their gods, and sacrifice unto their gods. And one call thee, and thou eat of his sacrifice. And thou take of their daughters unto thy sons, and their daughters play the harlot after their gods, and make the sons play the harlot after their gods.
I know when you see that harlots after their gods, obviously there's a spiritual harlotry that's referred to, and some of this is figurative, but actually there was a part of it that was actual. In many of these pagan cultures, including the one that we're referring to, the Asherah of Northern 10 Tribes, average married women once a year were supposed to prostitute themselves to the idol, and I guess a guy paid money to the temple, and sleep with a strange man once a year. So there was, in other words, it actually was prostitution as well as just figurative prostitution.
Interesting. In Islam, if a man and woman separate and they decide to come back together, he cannot take her back until she slept with a stranger, another man. He can't take her back.
Wow.
Yeah. No, I'm not gonna bet my retirement on that, but I read that. It was a reputable book. I read that in. Where with us, it's the exact opposite. If we separate and she stays with her parents and we decide to work this out, we can. If she does sleep with another man, then God's not going to bless that wedding, that marriage, or union, I guess I should say. But in Islam, she has to do that before he can take her back.
Yes. By the way, we're not saying that God can't forgive sexual sins, but you're going to ask, well, what were those temple prostitutes? According to the books I've read, the vast majority are not women who chose the profession. They were sold as children to be sex slaves to the pagan temple. And they were deflowered in most cases by the priest. And just like today, well, at least I haven't seen it, but I've read about it, that a lot of men prefer prostitutes that are children. And they also had male prostitutes. I didn't put those scriptures in here, but they also had male prostitution as well as part of it, the cult. And there are a lot of men that like to sleep with little boys. It's kind of weird, but that's the way it is.
Tom DeLay says that he's held in his hand DOG paperwork saying that you're trying to legalize some of these things.
They are. They've been trying to normalize. They're trying to normalize it. It's like the last one of the, I don't know, what do you call them? The untouchable things. I don't know, things that you would never imagine that they would get away with. One of the last ones they're trying to do. They've been trying to do it for years now.
By the way, I read this, and I assume it's true. I hope it's true. I read that in England a few years ago, boys, whatever that means, that they lowered the age of consent for boys down to 14. The reason that's significant, if you're a Bobby and you're a policeman, how can you tell the difference between a boy who's 14 and one who's 12? Therefore, it allows, pimps to use boys that are kind of close to that age for prostitution, because it's hard. By lowering the age, it makes it harder for the police to see what's legal and what isn't. Now, that's England. Obviously, they're probably 10 years ahead of us in what I call progressive liberal degeneracy. But maybe that's coming to a city near us someday.
California is trying to decriminalize underage prostitution. That way the girls don't feel bad about themselves.
Yeah, I heard that.
Wow.
I did.
Which now means that the man who does this with this girl, that's a decriminalized act as well.
Wow. That means prostitution and pimping in California might become legal or tolerated, if you like a better term.
Somehow accepted, I guess. I don't know.
Wow. But anyway, they're children. Of course, they grew older as sex slaves, but that's how they started as children. And it's, You know, that's pretty disgusting to sell children as sex slaves to pagan temples, but that's what was done. Let's go to the next slide.
First Corinthians 10:20. But I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to demons and not to God. And I would not that ye should have communion with demons.
And the context of that is some of the more knowledgeable Corinthians, they knew that the pagan gods were just statues. They were nothing. And they'd mess around the temples, probably for business purposes and cheap meals. But if demons are behind much of that stuff, you know, a lot of this paganism had to be planned by devils. It was spiritually dangerous, even for knowledgeable Christians, to hang around them. And I guess, well, that shows you there is something behind that paganism, Asherah stuff, and its demonic influence. And I'm sure the demons will try to subtly, anybody that hangs around them, push you further and further away from God. By the way, in case people, you probably all know this, but Asherah was the goddess of sex and fertility, and that's why Easter has colored eggs. In case you wonder, how do eggs have anything to do with Jesus Christ? Well, that's how it got in there. Empire, which got it ultimately from Babylon the Great and other traditions.
I had a guy come in my place today, and he just wanted to ask me questions about this, and this is what we talked about. So I find that interesting that we ended up here. He had no idea. He had no idea, but he listened to me. So maybe he'll think, and God will call him. I hope.
In some ways, Easter may actually be more pagan than Christmas and Halloween. I don't know if that makes any sense. Its roots may actually be more pure pagan than Halloween and Christmas. And nobody even thinks much about it. It seems like such a wonderful thing, right?
I've met some people that said that when I start to talk about, they'll do Christmas and they go to church on Sunday, but they won't do Easter because they've done some research on it. So it does seem to be more common now. People are looking at that.
Oh, that's good.
It's like my chiropractor asked me, do I do Easter or do I do Passover? I said, I do Passover. And he said, why? And I said, I can count to 3. And he just started laughing. And he goes, me too. I said, yeah, I can count to 3. So it's pretty simple for me.
By the way, the northern tribe, that religious crisis ended when God kicked them out, put them in exile. Let's go to the next slide.
All right, 2 Kings 17:18. Therefore Jehovah was very angry with Israel and removed them out of his sight. There was none left but the tribe of Judah only. Also, Judah kept not the commandments of Jehovah their God, but walked in the statutes of Israel which they made.
I want to make a point here that it's like a minor point, but it's true. Judah kept the holy days, which includes the Sabbath. And I think it allowed them to every so often repent, kind of kept a certain structure of God. And therefore, Judah lasted many, many centuries more, I think about 6 centuries longer than the northern 10, and of course came out of captivity. That shows the value of the holy days and the Sabbath and helping remind us of the true God. And one more slide. And this slide is supposed to show us just how strong the Asherah worship was among pagans.
Acts 27.
It's chapter 19, in case any of you wonder where that came from.
Yeah, Acts 19:27. Sorry, I didn't get that in there. So not only is this trade of ours in danger of falling into dispute, but also the temple of the great goddess Diana may be despised and her magnificence destroyed, whom all Asia and the world worship. Now, when they heard this, they were full of wrath and cried out, saying, Great is Diana of the Ephesians. And then down in 34, but when they found out that he was a Jew, all with one voice cried out about 2 hours, Great is Diana of the Ephesians. So
one commentary. Yeah. Can you imagine? And they ran into this theater that holds 24,000. This mob of maybe 20,000 shouting, Great is Diana of the Ephesians, over and over. Some translations have it Artemis. That is the Greek word for Asherah. But Diana is somehow what the English translations prefer. It maybe doesn't really matter. It's all the same person. But what I wanted to mention is that imagine them shouting that for 2 hours over and over because they thought there was a threat to the reputation of the goddess. Also, in Ephesus, at one time, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world was this giant statue of a goddess. And I'm assuming what one commentator said, it was the tallest building in the world at that time. I don't know, what they're calculating, tallest building, tallest statue, but at least it was listed as the tallest at that time. I guess it stood over the harbor at Ephesus, and apparently it was quite a spectacle. And they were so proud of having that was the home of the great statue of Diana or Asherah. And think of that level of fanatical support.
Isn't that akin to sticking your fingers in your ear and going, la, 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 la? I mean, you just don't want to hear anything else. You're just going to, you don't want to hear it. You're just going to try and drown it out.
It was a very, very powerful force, and one that I guess no one would really, let's face it, it was a powerful force. That shows you the power it had, and it still has power to this day. We will see as the world moves back toward earth worship and Mother Nature worship, at least some aspects of it will come back stronger and stronger. Don't you think so?
I think it already is, yeah.
And I'm not saying this is a bad movie, because it isn't a bad movie. But if you look at the movie Wonder Woman, and of course it's based on Greek mythology, so it's obviously that's all in there. But you kind of see where the writer of that story got some of his ideas from. Everybody may not agree with that statement.
No, I could see it when I watched it.
Don't you see it?
You can see it. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
You watched Wonder Woman?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not saying I can handle it. I mean, I can handle. By the way, if you watch the literature, if you read a lot of modern sci-fi books, they really come down hard on religion and God. I see it a lot more now. It's like they're planning it. But all I'm saying is I can handle it because I know what they're doing or what the writer had in mind. But I do see its influence on society. That's what I'm saying.
Yep. I just read a series, and the writer in this series I was surprised. He was kind of a pro-American style of, it was almost like a science fiction version of Atlas Shrugged, almost in a way. So it was kind of refreshing not to see the bashing in an author.
When you get a chance, if you can, email me the title. I might want to read the book. The stuff that I get people recommend I read, it's interesting, but at least a little bit of worldly influence and ideas that not are the best. By the way, next week, we're going to look at Lazarus and the rich man. What is the real point of that? Even though that may just be one parable, I think it's one that people misunderstand intentionally. And it's easy to do, and we should, just understand it as well as we can. Before the show, we were talking about anything happening in the world significant. Anything occurred, any of you, that's significant this week?
A little bit with just the way the president's being treated everywhere he goes. Very different from how the last one was. So we're talking today that a couple things, that when Obama had landed somewhere, they wouldn't even bring steps to the plane, but they're welcoming Trump lavishly. So maybe they're feeling safer with the new American president, building our military so that the world will be a little more safe. The other statement was Obama came out and said Assad absolutely must go, and jump forward a few years, Assad's still there and Obama's gone. So
the country that did what you're talking about was Saudi Arabia.
France as well. Oh, it was Saudi Arabia. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the reason, I mean, these leaders know we're starting to see a world without the influence of the United States, and most of the leaders of the world, not all of them, of course, but didn't like what they were seeing. It kind of, you don't want the people, they don't like to be hung out to dry. They might complain about us, talk bad about us, say we're, uneducated and we're rude or whatever they like to say about us. But a world without us is a little scarier than a world with us. And I think they recognize that.
Don't you believe that most of these countries realize they can trust America? Because, by the way, if America wanted to just be an empire that crushed all other nations, for 4 years we had the only country with the A-bomb, and we had a big Navy and a big Air Force. I mean, not that we want to, but we could have bombed anybody we wanted to back into the Stone Age. America was very victory, or magnanimous in victory. Maybe that's the best way to put it. Don't you think the world kind of knows? They may be jealous of America, but they can trust America to a certain extent.
Well, I had an Israeli guy tell me that he goes, when America's military is strong, Israel's safer because we are an ally. And he says fewer of us die. But when your military is weak, like it has been, weak and down, he said, then more of us die. And so he was very optimistic about the new president building the military and putting the people in place that he's put in. He said, then more of us have a chance of survival with a strong United States military.
It's like stabilizing the world. The stabilizer is there. One thing I'm sure of, in spite of what one media said, people in Poland feel a lot safer being on a fairly near border to the Soviet Union, and probably in Estonia and the Baltic states as well, with a strong American leadership.
Trump's speech in Poland was very strong, I thought. And the statement of, we want God. When did you hear a United States president ever say something like that? So maybe God will start blessing us.
Could be. One thing I do think, I heard one man complain, one expert, that if Congress doesn't get off their duff, he's afraid they won't, and pass tax cuts and tax reform, our burgeoning economy may be in trouble in the future. Congress has to do its part, and he's scared they won't do anything. I guess you call it Washington gridlock. So be watching for that. If Congress, even if it takes them longer than it should, if they come to you with a tax, let's say reform the Obama taxes and tax reform and business tax cuts and personal tax cuts, I think our economy will take off.
I agree with you. I think it's on the edge of wanting to take off now. I know home prices are up. It seems to be all over the place. And that's an indication that the economy is starting to gain steam.
And I do see signs, but I may be in the wrong place, that there are a lot of people, as best they understand it, want to be more godly and more biblical. The whole country is not going crazy. Or am I kidding myself?
Just what we see in the media. The people that control what we see and hear are the ones that are the problem. It's the regular people. Most of the people in flyover and that are not I mean, we're far worse than we were 30 years ago, I think. But as a whole, not as bad as what we're seeing on TV and hearing. Definitely not what we're seeing in the news. Yeah, the media is our problem.
Don't believe the media. By the way, before we leave, I want to ask people to play for two of our very best Christians, Carolyn Birch and Bill Birch. Carolyn's been fighting cancer. We won't go into all the details, but she had finally seemed to have won over one cancer. And then a second cancer came along in her lung, and it's been growing. And then the doctors did a hip biopsy, and that just started off all kind of pain and made things, well, at least pain-wise, made it worse. Pray for Carol is having lung trouble and some related problems to that. Pray for Bill Birch, two of our best Christians. And also Loma is getting ready to have a bypass heart valve operation.
Yep. It seems like the lists just keep growing and growing, so keep praying and praying.
Yeah, and I'd like to talk about the Howard family losing their dad and grandfather. The people who've lost loved ones, the survivors need prayers too. So,
yep.
By the way, how is Ray doing? He has a kidney problem in Tennessee. Any news on that?
It has good times and bad times. I haven't talked to him lately, but I'm sure I'll hear from him shortly. I'm sure he's listening now. So we hear mainly we keep all communicated through Facebook. If you go to Facebook and go to Intercontinental Church of God page, there's a page and there's also a group. You'll see postings for prayer requests and that there. And if you're not in the church and you still want to get in, you can just go to you go to Facebook, look for the group, Intercontinental Church of God, or the page, and ask to join the group, and you can just get on the page and post. So, but yeah, there seems to be a lot of people in the church that are having physical problems that we just need to keep praying for.
We're getting older.
So yes, we're getting older. Yes, we are. Well, maybe you are, Dave.
I definitely am.
Definitely too. Definitely.
It beats not.
It beats not. Yeah. My dad used to, when he started getting older, he'd say, "Son, don't get old," and I'd say, "What's my alternative? Getting dead?" I mean, what am I gonna do? I got no choice. You only got two ways to go here. But I know what he meant. Trust me, I feel it every day. I know exactly what he meant. But we've come to an end. Again, this was episode 205 of Line Upon Line. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. We want to wish everyone a wonderful rest of your Sabbath. And if you're able to get with a group tomorrow, that's wonderful. Cherish and love them, and be glad that you have them to share the Sabbath with. So we'll see you back here again next week. If I can hit the right buttons, we'll send us out of here. And that was not the right button. Let's try that again. Yeah. Oh, see? I know there's people out there laughing right now. There we go.
We're happy you could make it. So glad you are here, and hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye.